just ran?
It's not working. Oh, here we go.
Who just ran?
Hey, Jessica. Oh. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Or good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Wow. I see some familiar faces here. And names. Jessica, good job last night. You tired? Exhausting, right? Okay, wait a minute. Just gathering some people on Facebook as well. And we'll get going. Trying to figure out how to get this onto...
Oh, shoot.
Okay. It would be nice if I could see you guys, but it's up to you. I don't want to force you to go onto a video. I hope you're all doing very, very well. So we're going to start a new series today to people in Zoom land and Facebook land. And the topic we're going to work on together over the next few weeks, God willing, if we're able to string this out well, is getting better at being you. That was the title that was chosen for our topic. Oh, Alison Sklar from Israel. Nice to see you. What a nice surprise. What does Judaism have to say about self-improvement? In other words, where do we put it? Where does it fall into the rubric of life for us as Jews? How do we see the idea of becoming better people in terms of our general connection to God? Because really, if you think about it, should be disconnected and unconnected. I act the way I do towards God. That's the way I perform my mitzvot. And then when it comes to dealing with people, that's their problem. However, we all know deep down and in real life that's not the situation. That's not the case. The case is that our connection to God and our connection to each other and our connection to ourselves, in Hebrew, ben adam lamakom, ben adam lachaveiro, between us and God, between us and each other, ben adam la'atzmo, and the connection of a person to themselves are all interlinked and intertwined, and they're seen as one big holistic whole. That is how Judaism sees it. Therefore, if you to have a person, it may be hard to imagine such a scenario, but if you were to have a person who was extremely careful in all the mitzvot they have between themselves and between God, and completely neglected how they treat other people, in Judaism, anathema. Doesn't work. They are not fulfilling. They are not fulfilling what God wants from them. And by the way, the opposite is true, that if a person exclusive, people say this the whole time, I am nice to people, I'm a good person, why do I need to get involved in Shabbat or Kashrut or any other mitzvah between them and God? And the answer is, that's also not going to work. There is even a visual proof for this idea that we need to find a way, and this is tough. This is really, really tough. I've said this before 1,000 times, I've said it 1,000 more times. 1,000 Yom Kippurs, 1,000 Yom Kippurs is easier than one occasion of working on your character. That's the honest truth. That is the uncomfortable and awkward truth that unfortunately we have to put into our minds. So where is the visual proof? Just a visual proof. So we know that the mitzvot, of which there are 613, can be found in shorter form in the Aseret HaDibrot, in the Ten Commandments. If you look in the Aseret Dibrot, those 10 statements, which is what the word Aseret Dibrot literally means, but really refers to the Ten Commandments, all the Tariag mitzvot, all the mitzvot can be found encapsulated into those 10. And those 10 were given on a list. They were listed out for us. And that was the first interaction that God had between himself and the Jewish people through Moshe Rabbeinu. Right? So we have the Ten Commandments. Now these Ten Commandments, you would assume, have inside them some very important key concepts to who we are as a nation, as a people. This is the first time that we were given the Torah or the mitzvot. Everything somehow is going to be encoded in those 10 statements that, unlike all the other mitzvot were written on parchment, these 10 were etched into stone. Right? There's a certain longevity. Just the message, the way the information was given out was etched into stone. Charut el luchot. Other writings were actually put on top of the parchment. When you write with ink, they stay on top. This is etched in. So these 10 have something which are literally buried deep inside us. Now they were given to us in 2 tablets. Right? There were 2 luchot. They didn't have to be. You could have had one big stone that had all the mitzvot listed as a checklist. Right? If I were to go shopping, I make a list before I get there. I don't take out a piece of paper, write a list, stop halfway. You know what? Let me get another piece of paper to finish off this list. I walk in with 2 pieces of paper. Doesn't work that way. You make one long list. Now we can talk about the importance of number 1 versus number 10. That's a discussion we can have, but we see there's actually 2 opinions. Some say number 1 is the most important, and some say no. Number 10 could be the most important, but we'll leave that aside. We now have a listing of 1 through 10. The natural way would to make one big stone and stick them in one big list. However, that's not the way they were given. They were given in 2 separate stones. And the commentators, Rashi and the other Rishonim, and many other rabbis, have asked the question, why do we need 2? And every child in yeshiva learns the answer to this question. The answer is simple. Understanding the answer is more difficult. The mitzvot of 1 through 5 are we call ben Adam lemakom, between us and God. The word makom means place, but is also one of the code names for God because God encapsulates all space and represents the ultimate place. The other 5 are ben Adam lechavero, between us and each other. Notice they're put on 2 separate stones, as if to say that these 5 and these 5 are separate. They're their own distinct areas. These 5 mitzvot between us and God and these 5 commandments between us and each other are separate. However, they're put next to each other and therefore they're equal. So the physical representation of the 10 commandments being placed on 2 tablets when really the information could have been downloaded on 1 tablet. That sounds good, 2020. They were made separate but equal. Therefore, we are being told very early on in Judaism that there's 2 separate areas of life that we're going to be getting involved in, and they are separate, but they are of equal importance. Now, you could say, well, I hear what you're saying, but number 1 is number 1, and number 10 is number 10. And therefore, the first 5 was between us and God, believing in God, and not worshipping idols, and so on. Those first 5, you could turn around and say, well, they're still the top 5, right? When you have a list of 1 through 10, the top 5 are the most important, and the second 5 are less important. But actually, you could say the opposite. You could say that the second grouping of things between us and each other are actually more important and have more importance. Why? How could that be? Says the Ramban, Rav Moshe ben Nachman, one of the great Rishonim, who's actually a great Kabbalist as well. He tells us that maybe number 10 is most important because it's like the foundations of a building. Think of them all as a building. The bottom ones represent the foundations, And once the foundations go, everything else falls over. But if you have a list of 1 through 10, and number 10, by the way, is jealousy, which we'll come to. When it comes to most of the character traits we're going to speak about, somehow jealousy is the only character trait in the top 10 commandments. Therefore, there's something very deep about that particular trait, more so or connected to that particular trait. So he says that maybe number 10 and number 9, 8, 7, 6 are actually more fundamentally important than all the others. So now we have a visual and philosophical proof that the mitzvah between us and each other, how we improve our character in our day-to-day activities, is not only like cutesy and nice, but is actually fundamental to who we are as Jewish people. And really, it goes right back to the beginning of Jewish thought and Jewish life. Okay, that's part number 1. So what do we call this area of Jewish thought, this idea of self-improvement? And we talk about self-improvement, we mean how we relate to other people. How do we view it? What is the one name? What is the one name or one word we give this area of thought that today's class will be on and future classes as well? There's one go-to word and name we use to describe this. Would anyone like to tell me what the Bein Adam L'Chaveru, between us and each other, area of Jewish thought is usually referred to? I'll take an answer in the chat or on Facebook, or maybe you don't know, which is also fine, which is why you're here. So the area we're talking about is called Midot. Midot, hey, give it to me please, the phone, because it rings and then it's, thank you so much. Sorry, baby. Thanks. It's called Midot, or if you're Ashkenazi, Midos. What is that word, and how is that going to help us understand this idea of today we're looking at of becoming better at being us? The word Midot literally means a measurement. A measurement. This table has a midah. This computer has a midah. Therefore, the word Midot is plural. The singular is midah, and it means a measurement. So let's get this together. Let's pull this. The word for a character trait in Hebrew is midah or midot. And the word for a measurement is also midah or midot. Why would that be? Why would both character traits and measurements be the same? Well, it kind of works, doesn't it? I mean, when we try to figure out what a person's like in their personality, what will we say? Do they measure up? I mean, even in English, they get the idea, right? How do you measure a person, right? You don't measure a person's character by their height, right? That person is 6'2", or if they're Jewish, 5'3", right? What we do is we measure a person by their character, right? So that is how you measure up. So that's one idea. That's not today's discussion, though. What we're going to try to figure out is another idea of measurement, of character trait, of midot, which is how do I measure my response to the situations I find myself in? I'll say it again. The Hebrew word for a character trait is a midah in the singular, or midot. The Hebrew word midah also means a measurement. We said up to now, it makes sense. How do you measure up? How do you measure a person? By their character traits. That's what we're talking about. That's what we're interested in. Not by how much money they have in their accounts. We know rich people who don't act nicely. Not by how much they know. We know people who are very, very intelligent and yet are extremely cruel and nasty individuals. We're going to measure a person by their character traits. One answer. But answer number 2 is a lot more important and is going to inform us of a deep concept in Jewish thought. And it goes like this. When you find yourself, which we all do all day, every day, in stressful situations and challenges, how do you measure your response to that scenario? How do you measure? Because someone upsets you, somebody offends you, someone shouts at you, someone cuts in front of you in line in the supermarket, your kid says something, your spouse says something, your boyfriend, girlfriend, your boss. Midot means, how am I going to measure my response to that situation that I have found myself in? That is how you measure up, by how you measure your response. Let me give an example, because maybe it's a little bit too theoretical. One of my children may come in with dirt on their shoes. It happens all the time. I'm blessed with 4 daughters and a wonderful son. There's a lot of shoes in this house. God bless them. 4 female teenage daughters. There's more shoes in this house than Imelda Marcus's wardrobe. But I'll leave that aside. So one of my kids walks in and there's dirt on their shoes. And I say, do me a favor, clean off your shoes before you walk around the house. You're going to leave mud everywhere. I come back 5 minutes later. There's little mud footprints all over the house. How do I thank you? How do I deal with that? How do I deal with that? So I go up to the child and I say, didn't I tell you to take your shoes off and clean them before you walk around the house? Yes, Abba. Then why didn't you? It wasn't me. It's never them, right? There's a cookie missing, never me. They could have chocolate and crumbs all over their face. It's never me. Basically, we adults are the same. We just do it as a more, adult experience, all right, of denying the truth. Fine. So now I've got to deal with this child of the situation. So the first thing I've got to do is try to get them to clean up the mess, which is a trouble in of itself. They're going to find an apt punishment. An apt punishment. So I say to the child, you know what? That's it. You are not going to medical school. I was saving up and I was going to send you to medical school. Me and your mother had all this money set aside and instead we're going to use that to go on vacation. See ya, I'm out of here. What would the child say? Like, I'm 7. What do I care about medical school or any college? You see, the punishment doesn't fit the crime. How should you deal with the situation? I don't know. I'm not very good at punishing my kids. I let them do whatever they want. That's really my wife's job. But generally we say clean it up, or no candy, or less time on the computer, whatever it is. When a person acts towards you in a certain way, most of life is trying to figure out how I measure my response to that person and how they relate to me. A person may upset me. Do I destroy them? Do I crush them? Do I beat them up? Someone says something. Do I take revenge against them? Do I bear a grudge? Do I lose my temper? Do I not speak to them for weeks, months, years, or sometimes generations? So what we're talking about now is midot, character development, self-improvement is really going to be tested by how you measure your response to various situations you find yourself in. And that, my friends, is the secret to life, the universe, and everything. I'll go a little bit further. Unless you have questions, which I'm happy to take. Better if you can leave them to the end or put them in the chat. But I want to take this to the next level. So far, let's just sum up what we said so far, because this is a very good and important introduction to everything else we're going to discuss over the coming weeks. And we said, there seems to be 3 areas of relationships that we are dealing with. Our relationship to Hashem, our relationship to each other, and our relationship to ourselves. What we try to point out so far is that each one is its own area, its own element of work that needs to happen. But not only that, all 3 are connected. There's a holistic whole. We're saying that each one is dependent on the other. You can't be a person who is very careful with keeping Shabbat and keeping kosher and would never dream of eating that food over there or eating that restaurant or that person's home. And yet when it comes to business, acting like an animal, right? Being disgusting, cursing people out, acting terribly in traffic or in supermarket or wherever else it doesn't work that way. They are connected. They're holistically pulled together. That is how we started this class. They are connected. I want to go a little bit further because I did mention that there's an opinion that actually the mitzvot between us and each other, of which we're going to see over the coming weeks, there are a number of them, and we're going to choose a different character trait for each class. This is just the introduction. We're just getting started. But what we're going to see is that really in Jewish thought, in Jewish theology, in Jewish philosophy, in Jewish life, it is sometimes accepted that we are going to make mistakes when it comes to our relationship with God. And God is willing to overlook those stupid mistakes if, and here's the big caveat, and this is the big secret of Jewish thought and Jewish life. If you are working and trying to improve your relationship towards other people. I'll say that again, just to be clear. You're going to get away with a lot of garbage when it comes to your relationship with God, right? Those mitzvot, which don't involve other people, but involve you and God directly, your own personal connection to God. As long as you are careful how you relate to other people. If you're good to other people, you are going to get away with your relationship with God. I'm not saying that you can just do whatever you want in that realm, because both are important. But one does, excuse the expression, trump the other. I'll give you the classic biblical source for this idea. What idea? The idea that it is more important to treat each other better than just working your relationship to God. Let me give you a clear example. And this actually involves two stories in the Bible, in the Torah, that are juxtaposed, that are put next to each other. Right? We call it samuch. Samuch are put next to each other. And when two stories, or two ideas, or even two verses are put next to each other in the Torah, somehow those two stories, or events, or ideas, or laws are connected. And the two stories that are put next to each other in the Torah are, number one, the story of the flood. Remember the whole Noah story, right? That story talks about the people of earth who were acting terribly towards each other. Right? What brought along the decision by God to wipe out all, if not a lot of the world, to bring this flood to mikvah eyes, bring this water to purify the world? Well, the problem was, say Chazal, say the rabbis, people were going against each other. They were stealing from each other, stealing each other's things, husbands and wives, having such little regard towards each other. That, in a nutshell, was the problem of the people of Noah, and Noah was seen as a great person. He got to save himself and his family. Right afterwards, there's another story which happened later, which seems unrelated, and is called the story of the Dor HaFlaga, which literally means the generation that was separated. What was that story about? Well, you may have heard it as the Tower of Babel, the Tower of Babel. What exactly was that? So at that point in history, the people decided to get together and create a tower. When I was a kid, I learned this is a tower to reach the heavens. They weren't stupid. Not stupid at all. They weren't trying to have a tower to reach the heavens. They were actually trying to create a central base, which took the form of a power structure, which actually was a big tower as well, where everyone could be seen by everybody else. And this tower, like a form of, I don't know, KGB, Kremlin, whatever, or any dictatorship, was going to control everyone, and everyone was in view of this central power run by people. Okay? So they were going to abandon God, but control each other. That says the Malbim, was actually what was going on. It was a form of thought and mind control. We don't need God in our lives. We're going to govern each other, and this will become this central power base in order to do that. That was the Tower of Babel. And they were also punished for what they did. Right? For a number of reasons, it was seen not good by God. What happened to them? They were spread out. God said, I don't want you concentrated and only focusing on each other. I want you out and populating the world, because you're not controlled by humans. You're going to answer to me as well, says God. Okay, so we have these two stories. The story of the flood, that's Noah, the Mabul that came wipe the world out, and the story of the Tower of Babel, where everyone rebelled against God. Which of those two punishments was worse? Which of those two punishments was worse? Was the people of the Tower of Babel bad? Or was the preceding story, the story of the flood of Noah, was that bad? Well, you would have thought, right, that the people in the second story, were really bad. What were they doing? They were rebelling against God. The people of the flood were really just not nice. They were nasty to each other. And yet we see very clearly, said the commentators, that the flood people who were bad towards each other were wiped out totally. They were totally killed out. The second group, listen carefully, the second group who rebelled against God and wanted to wipe God off this earth, you would have thought they were much worse. But God's like, no, people do that sometimes. I understand. It's not easy to be a God believer and a God actor in this world. But you know what they were doing? They were working together. They were working in tandem. They created a partnership to build this big building to rebel against God. God says, you know what? I'm willing to forego my own self, my own worth, as long as you guys are working together. And therefore, I'm going to just disperse you. I'm not going to wipe you out. That is the classic biblical truth to the idea that you're going to get away. Like the people of the Dora Flood, the people of the Tower of Babel, with a lot of junk towards God, as long as we are unified and we get on towards each other. You know, I've had the honor of performing many, many weddings over the years, maybe, 150 of them over the past 20 years. But I've also had the unfortunate merit of performing funerals and, of course, attending many more funerals that I didn't actually perform. And there's a theme in every single funeral I've been at. The rabbi never stands there when eulogizing the dead person and says, wow, David Cohen, I just chose that name randomly. If your name is David Cohen, don't worry about it. David Cohen, what a great guy. He had the nicest car. I tell you, what a car he drove. It was just beautiful. When he drove down the street, fantastic. And that house in Miami, oh, just stunning. Overlooked the water. Oh, so beautiful. And his house up in Long Island was just so big, so beautiful. They never talk about that, do they? Nobody is remembered for what they have, right? You don't have a person who's, I don't know, a dentist their entire life and their tombstone is a large tooth that just sits there, right? What do they always talk about? They always talk about the person and how they helped other people. It's like, no, it's a given. No one just says they amassed a lot of money. What's the point of being the richest person in the cemetery? It does nothing. They always talk about, and every rabbi and probably every priest and imam, I don't care, they all say the same thing. What a nice person they were and how they treated other people. That seems to be all we are reminded of and reminded about when the end of our tenure on this earth comes to an end. That's really it. So inherently, we kind of know very clearly that when push comes to shove, ultimately, it's going to be how we treated other people. Not what we got, but what we gave. Not what we acquired, but what we dispersed to other people. And Judaism takes that concept really, really seriously. And that is going to fall under the realm of Judaism, which we're going to refer to as midot. Because as we said, midot is all about how a person measures up. And that is going to be dependent on how they measure their response to situations they find themselves in when they are placed in challenging or sometimes not so challenging situations and scenarios. That, my dear friends, I hope you're hearing me, is what we are all about. Let's go back to the opening statement that I made. I said to you that a person can keep 1,000 Yom Kippurs. Those 1,000 Yom Kippurs would not be as difficult as one occasion of controlling our temper. One occasion of doing the right thing to another person at the right time. Right? So this area and this focus and this obsession, which we all have, I mean, we all feel it, right? When we deal with mitzvot Hashem, the way we relate to God, which we all focus on. You know, this morning I put on my tefillin, right? I was here by myself in my home and I prayed, and that was between me and God. But from going to that to hurting other people, it's a mismatch. We're missing the entire point of being alive. right? That seems to be the way we are being evaluated in this world. Okay. I'm going to stop over there. I know it's been 30 minutes. Dayenu. Next week, God willing, same time, same place, same rabbi, same background. We're going to go through various particular and specific character traits because there is a vast amount that is written about on each one of the character traits. And we're going to begin with probably, speaking personally, but I know we're all dealing with it, probably the most important character trait next Wednesday at 12 o'clock, God willing, which is going to be anger, which is going to be the trigger we're going to see and the door that is going to open ourselves up to all other character traits. Thank you all for listening. I appreciate it. I look forward to seeing you all, God willing, next week. Same time, same place, same rabbi, with the same beard. Thank you, guys.